Speaking of sexy dudes, Joey Warren, welcome to the show.
I know. Happy to be here, man.
Thank you. Thank you. The last time I saw you was Saturday night, when you went to bed and we were in the Blue Mountains in some random location somewhere in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
Right. And it was absolutely awesome. How was the day getting back?
Dude, we had such a nice day. So we started off slow, woke up at like 10, and then kind of just had that little porridge. Did you guys get your porridge in the morning?
Yeah, we did.
It was good, right?
So good.
Yeah. So we were munching on that for a bit. And then, I don't know, we went and checked out the other campsites. A couple guys there. I don't know if you saw this, but I was checking out their fire setup. And they had some massive logs out there.
Damn.
They had the best stuff that could have been burnt. Like, we should have raided them. Especially when Ivy and I went to sleep and you guys were staying up. We should have taken all their wood because that was the best stuff. But yeah, then we just came back. We went like really slow. I reckon you guys would have been racing it, but we were pretty slow.
Mm-hmm.
We rounded out at like 2:30. But it just felt really quick, to be honest, because we were like mirandering through it all.
Yeah.
And the lighting was good because we're in the valley, so the sun's now coming from that side, and it's getting us, and it was pretty warm, and it was green as all shit, you know.
Yeah,
it was really nice. Yeah. What about your morning?
Fantastic. We woke up 6 a.m. We're out of there by 7 a.m. And then we got back to the car by 10:15.
10:15.
Yeah. And then we were on the road. And as soon as we were on the road, Eddie and I were like, we need to find a pie shop. And we found the best pie shop, Grumpy's.
You were at Grumpy's.
Yeah, nice. Like,
$12.50 pie though. I didn't get one.
They're expensive.
I bailed on it. No.
Dude, they were so nice though. Did Ivy get anything? Did you guys get anything?
We grabbed a sultana pastry.
Okay.
I think it's called like a snail shell.
All right.
It's like a circular one, and then just coffee.
Nice.
But I was feeling a bit tired before I had that coffee. I was looking at like a bagel shop that was maybe an hour in.
Okay.
I'm gonna be real. I don't know if I can make it an hour. Let's get some coffee soon.
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah.
Dude, Eddie and I on the way back, literally just before the car, we're heading up through that like rainforest biome just before you get to Rigby Hill, and
before the car.
Before this, all on the way home.
Yeah.
And we come around this corner and we hear these cockatoos just before we see them, and there's these 3 black cockatoos come soaring through the valley really close to us. Eddie and I were like, what? Oh, we lost our minds. It was insane. And we were on a trot too, because we did that you know, once you're at the creek and then you come up the hill towards Rigby Hill, like we did that in less than an hour, and we were just trotting through it. No
you would have been
breaks.
sweaty.
Oh, we were sweaty boys, but you know, it's a bit of fun. It's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Speaking of nature, speaking about getting away from the city, I want to talk about your childhood and you growing up in Kingscliff.
Yeah.
The differences that has between someone like me who was raised in the city and then someone like you who lives in the city now. What are some of the key differences between growing up in a smaller coastal town versus the big smoke of Sydney?
Yeah, no. Growing up where we grew up in Northern Rivers is so beautiful. Like, we had a nice property. It was just outside of Moolumbar. It's like overlooking the sugar canes. There's this kind of beautiful mountain called Mount Warning out there. It's pretty iconic, but it's really nice. And we kind of just grew up there, able to run around, plenty of space to go into the cane fields and go through all that. And then moving to the city, it was like a pretty big change. There's small things that you pick up on that are more just kind of like cultural. So one of them I found was with just day-to-day walking past people, like growing back up, I feel like you had to like interact with them, little nod, I know, a little smile. But in the city, it was complete opposite. I actually felt quite isolated moving here first off. One, because I didn't have any like real close friends yet, and all you gents had your own kind of school friends still going on. So that was one of it, and it's like you're with so many people, but you still feel quite isolated, and that was a big change. There's definitely some other ones. Transport was wigging me the fuck out for so long, but I don't know, kind of got nailed that one down. What else is there?
It's crazy how there's so many more people in the city, but such a lack of community. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many more people here than there are in Kingscliff, but I imagine the sense of community is greater at home than it is here.
Yeah, no, definitely.
What are some of the, like, you know, good memories or good call outs to the community coming together in Kingscliff to make something happen? Was there ever anything that stood out?
One stands out actually. I don't exactly know the year. It was probably 2019 or 2020.
Mhm.
There was some big floods that happened, and Kingscliff's fine, but we were still quite ingrained in like the Moolumbar community and a bit inland town. And yeah, the floods like took away houses off the river and like really swept the community. And it was great to see everyone like come together after that and kind of, I don't know, help out, remove all the junk, help, people where possible. That was a really big community coming together moment.
Well, it's crucial in those environments, right? Because no one else is coming to help you except the people already there, right? And you rely on each other so heavily. Whereas in the city, it feels very isolated, every man for themselves. And there's not as much like, implication for disaster. Like you're not getting big floods, you're not getting like crazy storms. Like
There's definitely parts are
for sure, but it's less. It's more urban, so there's less of that going on, and there's less farmland. So if there is a big storm or there is a big drought, it doesn't really matter because everyone works in corporate. But if there's a big drought,
work from home.
Yeah, exactly. If there's a big drought in Bega, people aren't going to be able to eat. So there's big problems going on there. Speaking of helping people, you've been a big proponent of the surf life community up there. And I know you served. Was it in Kingscliff Beach? Yeah. And so, tell me about that experience. How did you get started?
Yeah, no, the clubby life is awesome. So, I don't know. My family just got us into it straight away. We were always swimming. Like we did swimming squads really early on, and then surf life saving was just kind of the next step. So weekends, I had 4 other siblings. We were all just 3 other siblings. We were all just shipped out to the beach for the surf club. All the way through, liked it. We were at Cabarita Beach for a bit, and then we're at Kingscliff for, I don't know, 10 years or something. I'm still like good mates with a lot of the people I met through surf club. And then the volunteering side of things, that was always good fun. During it, it wasn't great fun, to be totally honest. Like we were doing it as a means to compete.
Okay.
They have this thing where you have to get a certain amount of hours, volunteering hours, doing patrols to then compete. And our club, the group that I was in, we were like a competing side of the club. So we were all just kind of doing it to tick the box, get those hours in. But like a lot of the people on those teams, there's only like a handful of really kind of like, I don't know, when we're talking about competitors, like they are super fit, they're the strongest swimmers, like they know all the equipment really well compared to just the regular volunteer guys. Like, I don't know, your 45-year-old accountant coming down to like give back to the community.
Indeed.
Great. But there's only like a handful of people on each roster that would actually be saving people if things came down to it. And then in our club, we kind of stacked this competitors roster so that we had a patrol that was just all the competitors. So there was this one squad of just like 20 people who, like, if you were swimming that day, you were the safest you've ever been in your entire life. Like these guys were so good. And then there was other patrols where it's just like nothing, don't swim,
Yeah, I hear you. Wow. You said that at the time you didn't necessarily see the value in it. Like it wasn't super enjoyable.
Yeah.
Retrospectively, how do you see that experience, and was it able to teach you lessons when it came to volunteering and helping the community that you reflect back on now and go, wow, that was so important. It gave me such a good foundation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just being a part of the community in terms of like the surf club, like that was just another opportunity to hang out with these people, and you're hanging out with older people who are in all different walks of life, all different careers as well. And then, like people kind of treat you a certain way because you're there being a volunteer. They're like, great work. And then I ended up doing some paid lifeguarding after that. And that's, again, like a really great feeling. You rock up in the morning, the regulars are walking past with their dogs almost know you, you know, because they're there every day, and if you're rostered on the same beach, you're there every day. Public holidays come around, a local might bring you some snags from their sausage sizzle and things like this. So yeah, it's really great to get amongst it, and you get to know the locals pretty well, especially if you're rostered on the same beach for quite a while. And then also, like, especially for paid lifeguarding, you're there with normally it's just one other guy if you're on a smaller beach in the Tweed Valley area. And you just be hanging out there, you have the tunes buzzing, you're like aware, but you never like super focused. You're just kind of like just patrolling really. So it's just a pretty nice kind of laid back kind of summer job.
Yes.
That's what it was.
That's awesome. You spoke about how you've got a big family, and I know you're really close to your family too. When it came to growing up in that coastal town, how important was it for you to be close with your siblings and have a lot of siblings that were out doing awesome stuff?
Yeah. No, it was heaps of fun. So yeah, we're all about 2 years apart. And well, by the time I was 16, my brother had left home.
Okay.
So kind of everyone in our family moved away to study at uni. And since we're all 2 years apart, I'm second youngest. It kind of like went. My older brother Lewis dropped off, and then my sister dropped off, and we're still like really close. But it's like they're not with you every single day. And like it would have been. I'm just imagining now, like having Lewis hanging out with me like every day when I was like 18. That would have been so much fun. 17 as well, you know. But yeah, we had heaps of fun, and it's just great because like we all surf now, so we'll go down and we'll surf and things like this.
That's so cool. Did you ever have any crazy locals or just like classic locals rocking up at Kingscliff every day that you just got to know and love?
There was some like know and love, less so. I think there was definitely a couple freaks hanging around. Like, oh, I can't wait for this person. There used to be this person like walking around Kingy that was called the fairy person, and he wore like these big wings on him and like fairy wings.
Yeah.
He just wander around and like cast spells on people. I remember Anthea came home one day and she's like, yeah, I saw him, and I was kind of like chatting to him. And then he said, I curse you to like an eternity of suffering. And she had to walk up the hill afterwards, and she's like, just damn, that sucks.
Bro, imagine having a really good interaction as well. You're like
coming out of the surf, like vibes high.
Yeah, it's just eternity of stuff. You get hit with it, and there's nothing you can do. What are you gonna say? Hit him with it back?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it has the same power. That's insane.
One of the great actually lifeguarding stories we had, and this is another like on the freak side of things.
Yes.
We were down at like Main Beach, and there was this old guy, maybe 100 meters away, and he's just kind of sunbaking there for a bit, and then he starts like the lady next to him starts like the head bobbing, and we're kind of like confused. Like, what's happening over there? And then I pull up my binoculars. What's happening over there? It's only 100 meters away. Turns out her head goes like under the towel, and the towel's bobbing up and down. I'm like, what is happening here? Anyway, I'm pretty sure she's giving this guy a head, but they're so close to the flags. Like this is couldn't be happening. And then one of the senior guys go over, and she like just buries her head into the sand afterwards. And it turns out they were like giving head. They sent him away, but
wow, right next to the flags.
Right next to the
flags. A whole bunch of people are.
Yeah,
that is freaky.
And this is middle of summer, like peak. Like it's busy. It's not as busy Freshie and these places, but like it's busy.
Still busy.
Kids just running around.
Crazy what people think they
This
can
guy's getting topped off.
Bro, he's got the best view of all time. He's on the beach. Oh man, that is insane. Speaking of crazy stories, you have told me some crazy rescue stories that you've been involved in. Like I remember there was one with a group of kayakers that came through and were relatively inexperienced, and they just got swept under, and you had to go out and save them. Please tell that story, and if there's any more, time is yours.
Yeah, no, that one was definitely kind of like the most full on, I'd say. Just because it was like really big surf, and the beach is closed because the surf's too big, and we're just kind of like, we're having a really nice relaxing day.
Yes.
Just chilling out, listening to music. No one's in the water, so it's a great day. It's kind of like when it's raining and you're lifeguarding the beach. You just set up these kind of like protectors, and you're like, no one's coming to the beach. This is all good. I can listen to a podcast.
Yep.
Listen to everyday people.
Tune it in, mate. You listen to Noah yap from the BS about birds, me talk about RFK, whatever we're going to talk about today. It'll be a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're on the beach.
Yeah, and then we kind of see these group of kayakers come across the headland. So this is Fingal Beach. It's a big headland that wraps around, and we see at the top there's like a group of bobbing heads kayakers coming around. Like, wow, these guys are pretty crazy. They're getting after it.
Yeah.
Turns out they want to come in, so they're like kind of wrapping the headland and then coming in, but the surf's quite massive that they start getting thrown all over the place, and kayaks are going all over the place. So yeah, it was just two of us on patrol, and the way it kind of works in that scenario is that one person grabs a board, goes out and tries to make the rescue, and the other liaisons with like they get on the radio talking to Surfcom and the rest of the people to get the jet skis, get additional resources, and give updates to, I don't know, like the management.
Yes, indeed.
So I take the board, I go out, I get a nice rip, so I get relatively unbothered by the waves. And yeah, a couple of these guys are like all over the place. So they've lost their kayaks, 2 have lost their kayaks, and then there's also like another 2 out beyond. So there was 5 altogether. 2 are out beyond the break, and then there's 3 that are kind of getting thrown around.
Yeah, in the wash.
In the wash, yeah. So I managed to get in there and like grab, I think, 2 of them. And instead of going in, I just kind of took them back out because we're really close out, and I secure them on the kayaks. So then they're nice and relaxed. Not really relaxed, but they're safe.
Yeah, they're not in the wash anymore. Yeah.
They're relaxed. And then grab the other guy, pull him in, and then head back out, and just kind of like waiting with these other guys till the jet ski comes. And with the jet ski, then they can tow them all in at once. So that's the kind of the safest.
Yes.
And like, yeah, looking back, I think I probably did do the right thing. Because if I definitely couldn't take 3 people in on my board. These are like, I know, pretty big guys.
Yes.
But just being able to secure them, waiting for the additional resources to come in, and then take them in, that was probably the right call. But these guys were like I think they were ex, or maybe they were training military.
Okay.
Maybe defend, like reserve force, whatever that thing is.
Yes.
And they were doing like a kayak challenge. So one of their they had a kayak instructor who was like an ocean kayak. He was very competent. But then the rest of them, I think it might have been their first time really out in surfing. It was massive, so they got hammered.
No life jackets either?
I think one life jacket came off maybe, or something like that. But they weren't like drowning.
Okay. So they were relatively well prepared, and even still just got hammered by the surf.
Yeah.
How big do you think the surf was that day?
5 to 6 foot probably.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So not kayak friendly, I guess.
No, not really.
No. Especially if it's your first time going out there.
Yeah.
Speaking of surf, you're an avid surfer yourself, both on the shortboard and a longboard. Let's talk about some of like your amazing experiences on the road, on the surf. But before we do that, how'd you get started? Give me like history into, how you got started surfing. Your family was a big part of it for you.
Yeah, my old man used to always surf. He grew up in Newcastle, so he was always surfing. But he stopped by the time probably our age, like uni.
Okay.
So a couple years ago, but he stopped and then kind of picked it back up maybe when he was in mid-30s.
Okay.
And I started maybe when I was 10 or 11, just with him instructing me. And yeah, just got into it that way. Like I still have the board that I was learnt to ride on actually.
Wow.
And I ride it pretty much every day just because I've gone through plenty of boards, but this one I just found at home one day and I was like, wait a minute, like a 510, plenty of volume, because I started on when I was like 10. So
yeah.
like, plenty of volume when I was 10. And I'm like, this kind of works pretty well, like 30 liters. Hell yeah, let's do it. So I ride that as my shortboard, and then I have like this beautiful 9'6" Thomas surfboards board that I got when I was 18 as like my 18th present, and I treat it so well. I have it like resting. You've seen it. I have it resting in my lounge room because it's so nice.
It's a spectacle, and it's a beautiful board. Because some boards, it's just like, oh, that's a really nice board, but this one's almost like a work of art at the same time. It's so nicely shaped, and it's brilliant.
They do so well with it.
Oh, for sure. Best wave you've ever gotten?
Best wave I've ever gotten. I've gotten some absolute amazing waves in Scott's Head. So that's near Crescent, a bit further, Port Macquarie. Are these ringing bells?
Yes,
yeah.
indeed.
So along that coastline, and that was just because I often used to drive home and then drive back to Sydney, and I'd always just enjoy make it a 2-day trip, rest for a bit, and then keep on going. And yeah, Scott's Head gets some absolute beautiful waves, and I've definitely gotten some dreamy ones there. It's my favorite spot. I get the longboard out. Even in the smallest surf, it's just like a nice bay, and I can cruise out there.
Yeah, super long rides.
Yeah,
awesome.
And it just puts you in such a nice headspace. Like I could then continue driving if I want, or I could stay the night somewhere. But it's like, wow, I'm refreshed. my back's not sore from sitting in this car for the last 4 hours.
Exactly, exactly. You and I both had a great conversation the other day about how surfing can be used as like a form of meditation, especially when it's not like super big and like especially longboarding, right? Because you're just sitting out the back waiting for a decent one. You get a super long ride. You get back on the board, head back out. It's not super taxing and it's not super like adrenaline stimulating like, big wave surfing is when you're on the shortboard.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience there. Was it always like from the start when you were 10, 11 years old learning, was it always kind of like this meditative safe space, or did that develop over time?
I think it definitely developed. So I was always kind of like riding shortboards, and I wanted to be like, oh, I want to be the best surfer, Like,
Yes.
that was the vision as a little kid watching the WSL and things like this. And then I dislocated my knee when I was like maybe 16, 17, just on like a really shitty wave beach break. And yeah, after that, it took a little while to heal. And then I was like I'm okay just riding longboards for a bit as I recovered. And I was like, I'm really liking longboards. This is so much more fun.
Yes.
Especially at Kingscliff, it's a massive sweep that sweeps through often. So a longboard, you can paddle up and down, you get lots of waves. And I just started taking my dad's longboard out whenever he wasn't using it. And then that just kind of grew. And it grew, and then I don't know, HSC comes along. I don't know, probably my first like really stressful time in terms of academic pressures and things like this. And I just found, surfing was really relaxing. A lot of my mates weren't really taking it too seriously and things like this. So I kind of felt like, I'm going to manage it myself. And surfing was just longboard whenever, wherever. It was just it.
That's awesome. Your past is in Kingscliff. Your present is in Sydney. You've kind of had the best of both worlds a little bit, right? Where do you see your future, Joey? Do you see it more in like a small, rural, coastal town, or do you see it in the big city?
Yeah. I think immediate future is probably still going to be in the city. Long-term future, if I'm looking at how do I want my life to look when I'm 40, 45, 50, 60,
yes,
it's got to be in a slower environment. I think that could be South Coast, that could be North Coast. I'm not sure where it is, but it's just like, I can envision the lifestyle picture clear. It's me waking up like pretty early, relaxing. I have space, like neighbors aren't a worry, can't really hear cars running around. I can have like a little shed, little kind of like zone off. I could be doing my work there early. I could be reading there. Ivy's doing her thing there. We've got little bubbers and kids and things like this. And then it's always just like 10-minute drive to the beach, whatever. Get back in. I could work whatever I'm doing easily. Come back. Weekends now like free, and it's just this flow eternal. Like I don't have issues with working and things like this, but it's just like on my own terms. I'm there. This is what I'm doing. This is me.
No.
That's where I want to be.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
When you touch.
What about you?
Oh man,
come on.
I definitely share that exact same sentiment. The noisy, busy nature of the city, even when you're not necessarily caught up in it, it still kind of gets to you. Just the cars going by, the anxiety that's like kind of forced on you just by everyone being in this little hub. It's sort of this race to get ahead. And the same thing that we talked about before, where everyone's kind of in it for themselves rather than being a member of the community. I think that's really important. We've missed a lot of that. I also think that this vision that we talk of isn't too far away. I think with new modes of transport, with an investment from the government in the right ways, we can create a city we can create an Australia that isn't dependent on cities. Because right now, if you want a high-paying corporate job, or if you want high-paying work, typically that's going to be found within the cities. But I don't think that necessarily has to be the way of the future. I think with technological advancements, like the ability to work from home, like these hyperspeed rail investments that we're seeing all over the world, but not seeing in Australia yet, I think that could really turn a page. And people like you and I who work in the corporate sphere can also live up the coast, down the coast, in a remote area of New South Wales or wherever in Australia, and experience still a great quality of life without being just noised out by the city, right? Because it really does get drowning to some extent. And we talk a lot about like what causes anxiety, what causes depression, why are suicide rates so high? And there's so many different factors that people talk to. Is it social media? Is it this? Is it that? Is it the food? Is it the pharmaceuticals, right? And we'll get onto that. But I think it definitely has to do with the environment too, just the natural environment that we've created. Like you talk about when you first got to Sydney, how the like public transport system was just a complete wig out. You had no idea what was going on. And I imagine it was a lot of like overstimulation. Like back in Kingscliff, you probably had 3-4 buses that you would know if like you probably had 2, one going north, one going south. That's it. Right. But you know, you live now in Surrey Hills and they got 9 different train lines, 1 million different buses. They got the new metro, the ferry. And as we're talking about, you know, transport can be used as a means of positivity and allows people to expand outside of the city, but it also can make you feel trapped in this little box of the city.
They got to fix them tolls as well. The tolls is another one that's like you're trapped. They'd put like the $15 fee across the border. These things like this, like come on,
it's ridiculous.
It seems like we're a couple steps away from just segregating each community entirely.
The privatization of our roads is silly and just makes absolutely no sense. The privatization of things that are inherently public is crazy. Like when you talk about like, oh, okay, we're going to, you know, like we're going to turn water into a competitive industry. We're going to turn the land and the roads that we drive on into a competitive industry, right? It's just like, that's really a slippery slope into things that, you know, aren't egalitarian, right? Like think, like, you know, think about like firefighters, for example, or police, right? That's not a egalitarian thing. Like if you pay your taxes, don't pay your taxes, no matter how much you earn, the fire is going to come out and put out the fire in your house, or the police are going to come protect you if something's going wrong, right? It should be the same with all these things. It should be free for all Australians to use. And the fact that we've sold these off, right? So a few people at the top can make some money while the rest of us suffer. It's literally treason against the country. But we won't get too much into that.
A bit socialism, man. I'm all for it. I 100% agree.
Yeah, it's gotten a bit crazy early, and I want to steer us back onto the right direction. You know, when we talk about the future of where we want to live, you've had some really interesting ideas, and I don't know if you still share this sentiment, but you expressed earlier last year that you wanted to experiment living on a boat, living on a sailboat, traveling around, being able to do that with Ivy, and you thought that was going to be the best way to see the world. Is that still, you know, an aspiration of yours?
Well, I think so, yeah, definitely. But that's also not something that I see myself doing for a decade. I think it's more like that would be max maybe a 4-year, 5-year thing. And I don't exactly know where that fits in, but it also takes like a lot of prep to get to. And we've spoken about doing something like that. It's so beautiful because you're traveling, but you're doing it in the most authentic way. Like you're getting on a boat, you're sailing across the ocean, and then like it's just a whole journey. It's not about like where you're going. It's about this is a journey. I'm just exploring, you know. And you can still explore these days. You just turn on the map off. Here we go.
We did it on the weekend. Literally, we went to the Blue Mountains.
Oh, we got lost.
We had no idea where we were going. I fell in the river twice. We got lost. We saw some amazing animals, and we got home safe. That's what it's all about. We were enjoying nature out in the wild. It was amazing, right? And you know, something like this, a 4-year stint on the water is a different level of freedom. You know. What does the setup look like for that? Like, how long do you think you'd have to prepare? What things need to be in place for you to be able to make something like that happen? Elaborate.
I think you definitely have to set it up with like a lot of time in advance, just because once you have the equipment, it is a lot of capital cost up front to get it going. And when I say that, I'm thinking like, I know boats are quite expensive, but there's definitely levels to this. Like if you get a catamaran, a high-end one, like that's like, I don't know, maybe 300K. But you can definitely come back to like older mono hulls, and sure, like when you're sailing, it's going to be like jumping all over the place. And mind you, I've never sailed.
Important disclaimer early. We've got no idea what we're talking about. And that goes for everything on the whole show. Yeah, everything that we talked about before this and everything that we are going to talk about, we know nothing about it. But anyway, continue on about how you want to sail. Yeah, exactly.
I think it can definitely be done. And I mean, with things like Starlink, and now you can kind of be self-dependent, but the money thing is more so like I've watched plenty of videos and people talking about 25 USD a year. That's enough to fuel, food, a bit of travel money. Sure, different locations, that's different, but I'm talking about in this, maybe in the Indonesias, like that's a massive area to explore, you know?
Great surf,
Yeah.
great people,
Yeah.
awesome environment.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about like 2025, like a remote job would be paying way more than that, you know? Repairs are another big thing, but the major thing is just upfront costs. And once you kind of sort that out, I think you're off and running, and it's just a matter of how long do you want to go for. And I think it's a good idea to plan ahead and be like, okay, well, how can I make this go that I'm not pressured into um like having to come back or having to sell a boat, I don't know, in Mexico or something, you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. In a tricky situation because you run out of money or something, right?
Who's going to drive your boat back, you know?
Yeah.
You can't just fly it back. You got to sail that shit back. So yeah, I don't know. There's heaps to think about with it, but I do want to do some form of that trip. That's definitely on the bucket list.
That's awesome. So you were saying maybe about 25K USD. So maybe about
That's like a year.
That's like a year.
year.
That would be per year. So maybe 40,000 Australian, let's say. And as you said, like a remote job, like a corporate job, especially in, let's say, in a decade's time, right? You know, that's in reach, right?
Yeah.
Do you see that as a possibility? Do you think it would be like a corporate remote job that's kind of the best way to get there, or are there other ways that you think that you could finance this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to do it would be making stupid money now, and then and then just have like some dividend just flowing through and paying that off.
Just have it saved up.
Yeah, yeah.
I hear you.
So that's the dream. I don't know if I'll get there. Like worst case scenario, yeah, like that remote job would easily be within reach, you know? Like we could do that now and get the remote job and make it work, you know? You know, maybe I'm just making excuses. We could just do it now. We could leave.
We could be on the sailboat right now with no idea how to sail, going to Mexico. It'd be awesome. Do you think we're moving away from remote work or towards remote work? Because after, you know, the COVID introduced it, right? Before COVID, it was 5 days a week for everybody. And before COVID, we were in high school. So we never experienced that working environment. And now we work in the hybrid environment, right? Where it's 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, or 3 days at home, 2 days in the office. And, you know, some people even do less. Some people are working entirely remote, entirely from home. But you're starting to see larger corporations, especially in Australia, start to push for more people coming back into the office. We've seen inflow of commercial property recently as people kind of start to, you know, use up more floors in their building and people start coming in a little bit more and mandates start coming through. But technology's advancing at rates that we've never seen before. Working from home and working remote has become easier than ever before. Which direction are we heading, Joey? Are we going right or are we going left?
I reckon in the short term, we're going back, we're regressing a bit, going left towards a bit more in-office time, especially for the large corporates. But I think an undervalued kind of thing in this whole process is that I think smaller businesses and new businesses that are now leveraging this kind of network, you're saying, like, I could be based out of wherever, but have a team scattered around Australia as well. Hell, scattered around India and foreign. Like think of an accounting firm that's using foreign resources in Manila and things like this. I think that is definitely here to stay, and that will like approach on the rest of Australia as well. So like offshore work is intertwined into this, and it will directly relate to us having more rights as well to work from home long term.
Do you think Australia has a problem outsourcing a lot of its work to the third world?
A problem?
Yeah. Do you think do you think that could lead to potential economic issues, potential social issues? Because
definitely
what I'm kind of seeing, right, with, you know, my own little inexperienced eyes, only been working in the corporate world almost 3 years now, but you're starting to see more of a trend of offshoring, especially in, you know, places like Manila in the Philippines, in India and Bangladesh and things like that, where they don't have to pay workers as much, and that's taking away from jobs in Australia. It's funneling money overseas that should be here. And if you work for an Australian company making Australian goods and selling to Australian consumers and then paying workers overseas, it just creates this outflow of money going overseas instead of building our own economy up. So that's the sense of why I asked that question. And I think, it's a tough game because, you want to get those expense numbers down. Every single quarter, those expense numbers have to be lower, or they have to be more competitive, or they have to match your peers, right? But we're starting to see a lot of corporates follow this same chain of offshoring a lot of the work, taking jobs away from Australians and funneling money overseas. Do you think that is going to course correct at some stage, or is it kind of just inevitable that we'll just slowly outsource these things?
I think it's going to be slowly outsourced. I don't think you can kind of rein this back in. Manufacturing that used to be Australian made, that then went overseas, and it's just like follow the money, like those at the top, the business owners, they're making a lot more money by outsourcing it, and I think that's just slowly transitioning across other sectors, and I think that's here to stay. I do think it's probably worse overall for Australia and the social implications of that. I think it will likely lead to a higher class difference. Those people who are on the top, obviously, making a lot more money from it, while the others are forced now to compete with some Pakistani donnies, like that's a lot harder, especially when on money for money. So the value there is harder to sell for an Australian worker. And yeah, maybe the government should find a way to step in, but also like overstepping boundaries could harm Australia more than it could benefit it, because like it is a global economy. Australian companies are competing with other nations, so to put those chains on them, that could also be harmful.
This is such a complex issue because you're talking about how the competitive capitalist environment that we live in, the social class that we live in, has created an environment where it's actually better to outsource and offshore workers because it's cheaper, right? And that gives you a competitive edge, and that plays into the whole capitalism thing. And then, but if you think about the government mandating private companies to do certain things, that is a construct of communism, right? Which has been seen as evil for so long, and maybe that is what's required. And I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's a solution that people look to. We've outsourced a lot of our manufacturing. With the AI revolution that we're currently undertaking and the offshoring trend of jobs going overseas, especially in the corporate sector, manufacturing's gone. Corporate big jobs are starting to go. What are Australians going to be doing in 20, 30 years, in your opinion, Joe?
That's a great question. Hell, I don't really know. Kind of makes me bring into a conversation I had with Nick Langkow a couple weeks ago. Yeah. Nick, this
is gonna be good.
Nick was talking about with the evolution of AI and how if you kind of go back to slavery enabled like a nation or a group of people to kind of I don't know, move beyond it and go into arts and more creative and I guess just follow their hobbies a bit more than they could when they were tied to jobs. Now, this is not to endorse slavery at all. Slavery is horrible. But the argument that he's making is that if AI could come and be restrained in not coming any higher, then it could serve that purpose as well. And it could serve it for everybody. And then that conversation went on further. And the idea surrounding that, if AI is there, could some bots and AI be granted? Could they be granted rights, human rights? What's so different about it in the sense that if it can do everything and see everything and it can convince you it has feelings, maybe it does have feelings. I don't know. Does it deserve rights? And based on the progressive nature of human nature, it probably will get rights. And then that's gone.
This is how you know we're fucked. Yeah. When we're talking on everyday people about the machines having human rights, that's when you know it's already over.
But there will be like a certain period of absolute bliss.
I hope so. And I think there is an AI utopia that a lot of people don't kind of see. They just see it as this doom and gloom. It's going to take our jobs. It's going to automate everything. We're going to live in this mundane, technology-ridden world, and all the emotion's going to be stripped out of life, right? And I think when people hear AI, that's what they think, especially older people that aren't familiar with it. But to Nick Lankow's point, and he's a smart man, we'll get him on the show soon, but he's talking about how if we could potentially outsource a lot of the manual things that we don't enjoy doing, like, construction jobs or, like manual processes in a corporate company, and focus on things that really bring us meaning, creative pursuits, hobbies that you can monetize, even silly things like this podcast. Where
philosophy,
exactly.
things like this. It's a second renaissance.
Indeed. And it can be, AI can replace us, but we can form a new kind of like human mindset that isn't focused on, like GDP and deliverables and things that aren't, material to the soul, but a part of the materialistic world. But we can actually develop ourselves and enhance the human species in fields like creativity and things like that, which I think is so much more powerful, right? So I think people miss that. I think people, they hear AI, they think doom and gloom, but there is potential here.
There'll be a lot of pain in that transition as well,
For sure.
Like transition breeds pain, and you can just imagine how many people's. Hey, he's there.
Carl's got ChatGPT open on the monitor, but if he's not listening to us, I don't know who is.
Yeah.
But, oh man. Okay, back on the boat for just 5 seconds.
Yeah.
If you could pull up the anchor anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be? Where would be your spot?
I don't know if it's feasible. Just Maldives, I think, would be so beautiful. There's so many nice reefs out there, longboard wave reefs. Yeah, I hear it's like just beautiful there. That's where I'd want to be.
And what about a place that you've already been that you'd love to go back?
Ooh, is it kind of like a, I don't know, metaphysical thing where you pull up and you're there back in time whenever I was there with whoever I was?
You can be whatever. This show can be whatever you want it to be.
On the magic boat.
The time traveling boat where you can bring mates of old. No, okay. That's the exact scenario I'm offering you, Joey. Hit it.
I think a sick one to do would be going back to Central America. I did a Central America trip, like maybe year and a half, 2 years ago, whatever. Going back somewhere around there, maybe El Salvador, but with a good group of people, I think would be so awesome. Like the people there are so beautiful, and you can kind of jump around and do whatever you want. Having a boat would be the best thing ever. Imagine like coming down El Salvador and then going further down through Nicaragua and things like this, and just being able to dock whenever you want. That would be so dreamy. Imagine having a good crew doing that. That would be even better.
Amazing, right? A good crew on the boat as well. Everyone knows, like, everyone's boat, like, boat savvy and can help out, and like all part of the crew. That would be awesome. Talk about that South America trip a little bit. Was there any like awesome stories or even crazy stories that came out of it?
Heaps of crazy stories. I don't really know where to start on it.
Was there one or two things that just really stand out that would make great content? That's what I'm really trying to say, you heard?
There was one night which was pretty silly in, where was it? I think it was in Nicaragua, in Leon.
Shout out. Shout out. Saw him today. Yeah, run it up.
Anyway, we did like this volcano rafting that day, and essentially
on lava.
essentially it's a it is active, I think, technically, like there's smoke and shit coming out of it.
Okay,
but down the side of it, it's just really fine shards of kind of slate or rock or some volcanic rock. So you can jump, or maybe it's dirt. Maybe it's like a really thin, it becomes dirt. Anyway, you go down it really fast on these boards, and it's a massive hill, and you go down really fast, and then you like finish down the bottom. You're like, wow, that was skits. I just skated down a volcano. So that was the morning, and then we went back and we hung out at the hostel for a bit, and there's this kind of like, I don't know, we're doing a bus bar trip, You jump from bar to bar, and they got the party bus for you, so you're going all the way through. And we like do a couple bars and make some friends. I'm solo tripping, so I'm like just making friends wherever I can. Anyway, we get a bit further. We're now well out of the city at like some bars down by the beach. I don't know, maybe like 30 Ks away or something.
Wow.
I end up like kind of blacking out down there.
Classic.
And I like blacked out on the beach. Woke up to like the water kind of hitting my feet. I'm like, oh shit, this can't be happening. The buses left. I then like stay at this pub for the night. Lucky I still have my money and stuff.
Yeah.
And I wake up, phone's out of battery. No one has an iPhone charger. We're in Samsung territory. And I'm like, how am I getting home from here? And I managed to put a bit of Spanish together.
Okay.
Like, de donde Leon, which is just, where's Leon? Where's the city? How do I get there, you know?
Yes.
And I managed to talk to someone about like a bus timetable. They kind of tell me, I don't know, there's a bus coming through at 11 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
So I'm just hanging around this beach. I got a bit of money, so I've got some pancakes or something, just enjoying it. Pretty hung, but like, man, this is kind of nice. Why is there's no one else in this entire place? Because it's just like a beach pub kind of thing.
Yes.
And then, yeah, bus comes, jump on. Most wholesome thing ever. They got the music playing. It's 11 o'clock, but there's kids in school uniforms. I don't know if they just got back or they're going there. I don't know. But it was just really nice. And the bus kind of took me the whole way back to Leon, and then I figured my way back from there.
Wow. I feel like experiences like that have so much to teach you. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like one of the beauties of travel, because people talk about travel is an eye-opening experience. You get to experience other cultures, you get to meet new people, see new lands, which brings a new perspective to you and where you live, right? But then that's the obvious side, I feel like. But then there's that other side of the coin where, how do you deal with adversity? How do you deal with problem solving in real life when it's a logistical battle? You've got to get a plane here and make it to here to be able to get there on time. You don't have enough money to sort this out, but you're going to have to work through it and find a way to make it work. What other lessons have you been able to derive from traveling?
Yeah, like first of all, that's a big reason why I did want to do this solo trip. I thought, like, let's test myself, you know? Like I know enough Spanish to kind of, I don't know, figure where I need to go. But also I can't really hold a conversation with anyone in Spanish. And like, I know there's going to be a whole bunch of horrible shit that happens on this trip. Like, let's see how I deal with it, and let's just see how I bounce back. And that was a good motivation for me. I was like, I think I can do it. And I did it, and it was great. Didn't really have any issues at all. So yeah, have you ever thought about doing some solo trips?
I've never.
I think you'd really enjoy it. I think you'd really enjoy it.
I would. And the test is so good because you want to be able to test yourself on your own, to your own devices, have complete freedom, and know that you're going to be safe, going to be able to figure it out and have that confidence about you. Leon really opened my eyes to it when he told me about his Indo trip, because like your trip, it sounded awesome, but I don't know. No one had ever really talked to me like, hey, you should do some solo traveling on your own. You would really like it. I never even really considered it. But when he did the Indo trip and he was preaching to everyone that like everyone should solo travel and everyone should get out and do it, it really opened my eyes to it. So, you know, credit to him and credit to you for, you know, inspiring me and other people that we know.
You got to do
things like that.
I think you'd love it, man.
I would.
Where do you reckon you'd go?
I think a lot of like, you know, soon, when would it be? It'll probably be June, July 2026. Some of the boys are thinking of doing Europe. Yeah. And I think a bit of that I want to do solo, especially coming back to the homeland in Serbia. I think that'll probably be a solo trot, not just because I want it to be, but because I don't know if any of the boys are coming with me to Belgrade. But yeah, exactly. Run it up. So that'll probably be, you know, my first time really doing some solo travel. But when I was in Japan with my family, there were periods where I wouldn't see them for a couple of days just because I was out doing my own thing on a crazy adventure and things like that. And I'll just have my own mission. I'm going to summit this mountain. I'm going to stay here, camp here, and then move on and then make my way back and then meet up with my parents at the airport and then go from there. And it wasn't 100% solo because I always had that safe haven of my brother and then, you know, my parents to kind of come back to. But it was kind of, I'm in a different place doing my own thing. All I've got is the pack on my back and I speak no Japanese and Japanese people don't want to talk to me, it seems. So here we go, right? Yeah.
As you're repping the shirt now.
I did. I got this. This is a Pink Floyd shirt that I got in Japan and it's one of the coolest shirts I own. I have so many cool things that I got in Japan. It's Japan, there's so many upsides to Japan and there's so many downsides to Japan and they play into each other. Japan's a very materialistic culture, I found. Like they're very focused on what they have, very focused on their fashion, very focused on what kind of car they have, what type of job they have. They're very status based. And that kind of plays into like their social hierarchy, which is cool because you're able to get cool stuff like that, right? But it's not necessarily the way I'd want to live long term. I think there's, you know, more meaningful pursuits than materiality. And I think a culture that doesn't necessarily favor those isn't one that I want to really be a part of long term. An amazing culture to visit, though, a great country, great snow as well, and amazing people. It's hard to form connections with the people just because you don't speak the language, and a lot of them are quite reserved and hesitant to talk to you. But when you get going with them, they're just as lovely as everyone else, just like everybody on this entire earth is, it feels like everywhere you go, whether it's South America, whether it's Southeast Asia, whether it's Japan, Europe, you meet good people everywhere. And that's what this podcast is about. Everyday people. We're all completely different and we've all got amazing stories to share. But in that journey, we're all exactly the same. We all live this human experience. We're all in it together. We all got exactly the same problems. No one knows what this life is about. We're all trying to derive meaning in our own way. And we're all living in the craziest time in human history as well, which doesn't help. We talked about you having a small knowledge of Spanish before you going over. Yeah. And I want to use that as a caveat to talk about your girlfriend, Ivy. Talk about how you guys met. And I want to kind of, because Ivy, we spent the weekend with her in the Blue Mountains, and she's one of the best people I know, really. Like when it comes to just being an open mind, but then a compassionate soul too. Like she's very free thinking and forward thinking, but she also has that like compassionate, loving, caring nature about her. So tell us the history. How'd you guys meet?
Yeah. No, Ivy's awesome. So yeah, we met in our Spanish class in uni. Originally, I was planning to use that time to do a what do they call it? A trip through uni? A secondment? No.
What are you trying to say? Exchange?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exchange. I was going to do an exchange. I was going to go to America in San Diego, and I wanted to do this exchange. I thought this was going to be a great 6 month. Will Krellin did it the year before, I believe.
Okay.
Anyway, I was planning that, and then I filled out my documents wrong, like my application form. Typical.
Classic Joey mistake. Like, that was in the book. It's like, seriously.
And then, like, I missed the deadline because I didn't change them in time. So then I was like, okay, plan D is just, I have 4 electives to do.
Yep.
And I just spent all those on Spanish. And then, yeah, I met Ivy in that first class. Our teacher actually hooked us up for a bit. So her name was Pilar, and Pilar was our Spanish 1 teacher. Pilar, I'm at the back with like 2 other guys. Ivy's in a different table. We're getting into partners like week 3 or something, and Pilar goes to Ivy, why don't you go hang out with Joseph at the back? I think he's all alone. And she winked at Ivy, I believe. And then Ivy come, and then we like, I don't know, hit it off straight away. A couple weeks later, we go on our first date, blah, blah, blah. Then we both go on our South America trips. We come back, we move in together. We've been living together for, yeah, like, I don't know, a year and a half or something.
Wow.
But yeah, Pilar set us up with that little off you go.
That's crazy. Without classic Joey Warren filling out his forms wrong, right? Without that San Diego exchange falling through, without Pilar being the teacher to put you guys in there, without you and her being even in the same class, you guys don't meet, right? And, you know, your life is materially different, right? When was the moment where you realized that, like, okay, this is serious, you know? This is...
With Ivy?
With Ivy, for sure.
It was really early on, actually. So, couple dates in... I was still living with my grandparents, Pennant Hills area, and like she lived in Wollongong, so we were really only seeing each other at uni, going for dates pretty much most nights after class because we're doing night classes because maybe I was on internship. I think it was internships. I had to do night classes. Anyway, pretty early onto that, I realized, wow, dude, Ivy is freaking amazing, and if this is gonna fall through, it's going to be me making like some stupid mistake. So I realized that, and I haven't made any stupid mistakes yet. So we're all good and loving it. So that's kind of like, I knew really early on that it was going to be a pretty long-term serious thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I feel like people that stay together kind of all say the same thing. Like early on, they knew that this was more than other things they'd had in the past. And this was something special that was kind of going to last.
Yeah. I met Ivy's parents maybe... I think on our second date, I went...
Wow, that's early.
Yeah, I pulled the trick. I said, I'm
trying to find the source.
What I said was, I like was driving there. We're gonna go have dinner, and I said I was going surfing. I was gonna go camp out and whatnot. Okay, but let's go for dinner. Anyway, the weather says like 40% of rain, and I'm like, oh, Ivy, looks like it's gonna be raining on the weekend. Can I crash at yours? And she's like, yeah, that's all right. So, like I pull up to hers, meet the parents pretty much straight away. And then, yeah, like they've been lovely ever since. But I knew straight away as well when I met the parents, meet the parents are cool. Parents are really nice. Like, okay, she's been raised well. She's good.
So important, right?
Yeah.
So important. Not just necessarily to reflect on the person that you're dating, but to reflect, to kind of prophesy your future a little bit. Because like she can be an amazing girl, and then you meet your parents and you're like, what the fuck? Like this is going to be tough going, right? And it's so good when those things just work hand in hand. And like, Ivy, it's like, it just makes sense, like, oh, you're Ivy's parents? Of course you are. You guys are so good. And she's also awesome, right? You guys have such a good relationship in the fact that you're both so close with each other's families. Like you guys have spent a lot of time with each other's families, both doing trips and both just casually in Sydney and along the East Coast. How important do you think that is?
I think it's very important. Like when you talk about like long-term future, which is kind of what we're talking about here, grandparents, your parents, like you are one big family, and this is the whole point of it. It's like I become part of your family, you become part of my family. And I believe that that's what it should be. It should be now just a bigger family. An interesting opinion actually was from my Oma, and that she said that like when I moved in with my grandma, grandpa, when they moved in together, they like we're a new family. We still like our families and we still engage with them, but we are a new family. We are a separate family. And then when my mother and her siblings, they then grew up and they found their partners. It was a similar kind of thing, at least from like my Omar's direction down. It's like come hang out with us whenever you want, but we respect that you are now a new family and this is your family. And that's a massive separation from like I know your culture and also like what I think it kind of should be.
Yes. No, it's a completely new perspective because you're just like, I'm young, I'm in a relationship, but for someone to put it in that lens and say, this is the start of a new family, it really makes you go, wow, like that's what this really is all about. And that's what they seeded and that's what you will seed and, for generations to come. Like really, it's a testament to how close your family is, but then how like trusting the relationship is that you're able to bring each other all over and there's no fear about it. Because some people, they're a bit scared to bring their partner around their family, maybe because they think their family's crazy or maybe because they think their partner's crazy, but that doesn't seem to exist with you and Ivy. It just seems to be very open, very free flowing.
I think we're pretty lucky.
Honest.
I think we're pretty lucky that both our families are pretty great, immediate families, and so it just flows well.
That's really good. How does she shape you?
How does she shape me?
Yeah, emotionally, physically, anything like that.
She's definitely opened up my emotional side a bit more, I think. Just a bit more empathy, a bit more probably understanding, I think. It's similar to empathy. But yeah, just I think that was a big thing. One major struggle that I did have early on in our relationship was the idea of being vulnerable and specifically intentionally being vulnerable with your partner, because to not be vulnerable is almost like an insult to them. Like how you kind of like holding out this part of the relationship, like to console someone when they're hurt and you can comfort them, like that makes you feel so good, right? And by not being vulnerable, you're kind of like pulling that away. You're holding that to yourself, and that like I don't know, it's a bit of a self-protection mechanism, but I think I learned it and I'm better now, and I've consciously be like, I have to tell her this. I don't want to tell her this, but yeah.
No, agreed. And like kind of that masculine like ego side takes over a little bit, where you want to bottle it all in. You don't want her to like know your problems because these are for me to deal with. It's none of her business, that sort of thing. And it's not because you love her any less or anything like that. Like in a way, you kind of justify it in your own mind by saying like, oh, I would just stress her out. I would just like, with the things that are going on in my head, she doesn't need to know. It'll just like make her worry, right? But you withholding that vulnerability is like, that's the most expressive version of yourself, and without that side, you're not really surrendering your whole personality, your whole character to someone, which is exactly what a relationship is about. And over the course of a long relationship, things rear their head, right? And if they don't come up now, they might come up later in ways that you didn't expect. So that's a really, really good point, Joey, to just be honest, vulnerable, open from the start, and lay a foundation in the relationship for that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's harder for guys.
Mm.
Just because there is that kind of like sense of ego and masculinity, but I think it should definitely be intentionally sought after.
Mm. How do you shape her?
Ooh, I don't know. She says I'm a good financial consultant.
Damn, hope so.
I tell her some things aren't worth buying, but
That's handy to have sometimes. Well, Ivy, she's such a creative soul too. Like
I think I do add a bit of logic and structure.
So she's kind of like the left brain and you're the right brain a little bit. She's got that like creative, kind of spontaneous side where you're more like numerical, quantitative, more locked in.
Yeah.
That's an awesome dynamic. And it like, people always talk about having a lot in common, but I think having differences like that to build each other up really makes things exciting and like a complementary relationship in a way, I guess you could say.
100%. And you make such a stronger team. Like if you're looking at like things you have to do, things you have to face, having both those sides coming together, like you're just so much, you're a lot more well-rounded as a team and as a couple.
Do you believe in the concept of soulmates, that you have a singular person out there for you? Or do you think that love is more about decision and effort?
I think it's a bit of both. Both doesn't work. Both means you lean to, I think.
Okay.
I think it's more of a decision, to be totally honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you find someone that like, wow, someone that really impresses you, someone that you're like, wow, this is really amazing, and you like you love them, you learn to love them,
Yes,
and you grow in that sense. I don't think I do believe in love at first sight and things like this. Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective and very, very well spoken too. Does the coincidences that led up to you meeting make you question that? Like, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but like, all the crazy things that we talked about before, the San Diego exchange that fell through, not filling out the forms right, being in Spanish class, the teacher pairing you guys together so early in week 3. Do you think like, do you sit back and go, man, if that stuff didn't happen exactly the way it happened, then I wouldn't be here talking with me right now? Does that play into your mind?
Yeah, it does. It does. But then again, like, I think things like that happen all the time. And I do believe, actually, spiritually, I'm not sure exactly what I believe, but I do like the idea of there's someone pulling strings, and that's the end result of the strings being pulled. Like there's someone there waiting for you. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Like I think it's powerful to think that, like, as you said, these things happen all the time and it's up to me to make the most of them. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference. You don't want to be waiting for a soulmate, waiting for that love at first sight. You want to be expressive. You want to be you want to be looking, but you don't necessarily want to be like forcing yourself onto other people or like searching too hard, because then you can kind of lose sight of yourself a little bit too, which is dangerous. You and I, like a lot of our conversations, especially recently, have had to do with, the US administration, particularly the new US administration, particularly with RFK. For a long time, you've loved Robert F. Kennedy. And sorry, this was a crazy transition right here. But I really want to talk about it because, this is going to be fertile grounds for a great comp. But, very early on, you were on the RFK train. Like before he'd, come onto Trump's side and was a member of the Republican Party and he was running as an independent. Like you and I were talking about, man, this guy, like, what if he becomes president? All the things that he could potentially implement. He's been saying the same story for, 30 years. What initially resonated with you?
With RFK?
Yes.
I just kind of saw a lot of my kind of beliefs and perspectives like held by him, not all, but more than any other party or any other individual, and that's why I was like, damn, I wish give this guy the keys. That's why I was there. And I'm sure, like, when you see people who are really kind of passionate about various politicians, I'm sure that's why. Like, they're like, this guy gets me, the other guys don't, this guy better win, So that's why I really liked RFK from the get go. Like, he was conscious on health. Like, America's like pretty badly been hit by the stick on that part.
Mm-hmm.
So health is a major one, like probably the main one, and then yeah, I think he's like a pretty open mind guy. He's Kennedy. I thought he'd be able to balance out the right, the left, and I think it wouldn't be as polar. One of my main issues with Trump, like, was that he's so polarizing that, like, even if the majority of people, even if 60% like really liked him, hell, 70% loved him, but 30% hated him so much that they're willing to like cause an uprising and things, like, that's not who you'd want as a leader. And Australia probably does it pretty well because we have like compulsory voting systems and stuff like that won't really happen. But yeah, that's my main standpoint.
No, that's really good. I think you're completely correct with Trump being a polarizing figure. And no matter how good his policies are, or how good he's handling a situation, or how badly he's handling a situation, he comes out and speaks about it with such an ego and such a polarizing nature that it just divides people. And what the US need now more than ever, and the world need more than ever, is to come together. Someone that can unite and someone that can be sort of bipartisan. Someone like Robert F. Kennedy, who has ties to the Democratic Party and has been a Democrat, most of his life. And then but also has these very like mid to right level like views when it comes to things like health, education.
Right.
Exactly. And it can bridge that gap instead of this polarizing kind of display where we've got this, bipartisan thing where, the Democrats are all for a woke agenda and then the right is all for shutting it down by any means necessary, which just creates division because it means that people are going to be, are going to find their side of the coin and stick to it instead of coming together. It creates a lot of unease, and it feels like there's more unease in the US than probably ever before. Like they had the No Kings protest, what was it, a month ago? They've got the No Kings 2.0 protest going on like this week, I believe. So it seems like protests in left-leaning cities, there's just protests, and then in right cities it doesn't really feel like anything's getting better. And Trump, he's done a lot since he's been in office, but not a lot to necessarily heal. He's done a lot to polarize and to project himself onto the country. But a lot of the healing that we were kind of hearing about in the campaign, especially when it came to a lot of the wars that are going on overseas, and then a lot of the like foreign policy, a lot of the economic policy, it hasn't necessarily been, one-way traffic for him. It's been this very colluded battle behind the scenes and mixed messaging, and we're doing these tariffs and then we're pulling back on the tariffs and then we're going hard on the tariffs again. We've got a trade deal in the works.
Dude,
oh no,
horrible foreign affairs, Well,
he's just so polarizing. He just really gets under people's skin, and he doesn't understand that other countries have nationalism too. Like when he was talking about, Trump loves the US and everyone in the US loves the US. They're just like, they think they're the, kings of the world and that the whole world's owed to them. But he was talking about Canada becoming the 51st state. But what he doesn't realize is that's pretty offensive to Canadians who are like, nah, we're Canadian. We've lived here. We really love the country and we don't want to be part of America. Like our independence means a lot. And that's why they became independent in the first place. Right. And so, saying something like that and it's really just a joke, but it really gets people riled up. And now all the good stuff, if you believe it's good, if you don't believe it's good, but all the positive stuff that he could potentially implement is now just up in flames because this country hate him because he says something inflammatory, right?
Yeah. I mean, as you're looking at, like, Europe hates him at the moment as well. Canada hates him.
You'd probably say Australia hates him. Like, you're on a broad sense, and it's so, it is his fault, but it's also like a product of the media too.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get back onto RFK because there is some serious meat on the bone here. I think when you talk about industries, and we were talking about war, we were talking about the media, we're talking about pharmaceuticals, right? When you have pharmaceutical companies that make money off people being sick, you're going to have them wanting you to be sick because it's going to make them more money. When you have companies that profit off war, they're going to want wars so that they can continue making profit.
Yeah.
When you have media that make money via viewership, they're going to spread fear, spread misinformation, spread, clickbait headlines that trap your attention, right? Do you think RFK has the potential and is putting together the right team and moving in the right direction to dismantle the corruption that's taken hold of the US's both food and pharmaceutical industries?
I believe so, but so what's he got? He's got 4 years to do it.
Yeah.
What are we in to it now. We're like 150 days or 140 days or something like that.
Indeed.
Um, my understanding is that he ran an overhaul on the current kind of pharmaceutical drugs that are allowed, or no, food, like allowed food. So he did
Yes.
an overhaul on this.
Yep.
He's reviewing it all, and they're all kind of going through that. I think that's like a great step.
100%.
I know there's some things that have been kicked out already, and we're banning that. That's all good, but I just think like doing an overhaul, independent review, always beneficial. And I know they've already found some things that they're kicking out of the system. So things like that I think is great. It's a massive task ahead of him. I'm sure people have been assassinated for less. So like I hope he can do it. I think like medicine is like a human right. The ability to, and Australia does it well, but like the ability to do that. If you're sick, there's someone there that can kind of like, we can help you, we can prescribe you these things, and they're making such massive profit margins on things that are basic human needs that it's past wrong, it's evil.
Yes.
So that's my standpoint on it, and I hope he can overturn it. But there's just so many moving parts in that. Like I know their review committee that like passes drugs. They're also like the funding for all the major universities that create the drugs, and then I also believe they get like a profit on, or like a not a profit, they get
Commission?
they get a commission. They get a commission on things they pass, which is like it's a crazy incentive to pass more drugs. And then you look at the stats versus like Europe versus America, how many like legalized food like chemicals they're allowed in their food, and it's like triple, quadruple the amount. And it's like, okay, well, what does America know that Europe doesn't? And you can kind of like trail it back, and you're like, okay, well, this is pretty shady. You look at the bigger picture, and you're like, wow, this is all shady. So
damn right.
Review that shit. Hopefully you have someone there who's not biased and who can stand their ground when they think it's wrong. And I think that's how you kind of change it.
No, I think in the US, they've got 3 times more prescriptions filled than any other country on earth. They've got more autoimmune disease than any other country on earth, higher rates of cancer, higher rates of heart disease, and they're the wealthiest country on earth, right? So how can the wealthiest country on earth, mind you, a lot of that wealth is tied up in the top 1%, top 5%, top 10, and, you know, the middle class and lower classes are suffering. But you know, it's crazy to think about this divide between rich and poor. And we already talked about on the show how, you know, potentially an AI revolution in the next 20, 30 years only deepens that divide and makes it harder to get to the top, and makes, you know, the working class essentially disappear into, you know, the commons that suffer through like cost of living crisis, through a housing crisis, and you know, continuous crises that they're experiencing with their own health because they're ingesting poison food and crazy pharmaceuticals that they don't need, right? I think when we talk about the pharmaceutical debate, it's very complex because we're talking about things that we don't necessarily fully understand. Neither you or I are trained doctors and researchers or scientists or any of that nature. But what's something that is so much more easy to wrap your head around, and something that's so vital to all of us, is food, right? And you already talked about and alluded to RFK's bid to ban things like food dyes, seed oils, maltodextrin, all these things that are highly processed ingredients that weren't in our food 30, 40, 50 years ago, and have been added not necessarily because of any other reason except profit, right? Using high fructose corn syrup is more profitable than using sugar, right? But it's worse for you. Maltodextrin, instead of using genuine corn flour, is cheaper, and therefore that's why they use it, right? And these really cheap food dyes, which have now proven to give you like terrible long-term consequences, including cancer, right, are finally out of the American diet after being passed by the FDA that was probably paid to do so anyway and earned a commission on it, right? And you start reading into these things and you're like, this is insane, right? Surely this doesn't happen in Australia, and we live in it. We have the exact same sort of problems with our food system, and it's crazy the duality that we live in, right? Do you think we need our own like Maha movement, like a Make Australia Healthy Again movement? Because I think the Republican Party is so polarizing right now. You've got Trump at the helm of the party, and he's sort of like dictating the view for both the right and the left. Whatever Trump says, the right love it and the left have to hate it. You know what I mean? Like Trump like the Democrats have always been the party of free speech. They've always been against censorship, against propaganda, right? And now Trump, he's all about free speech. He wants, X to succeed. He's got his own like platforms and things that are more open. And now the left is all about censorship, taking down misinformation, not letting people speak their minds, right? And so it's like, which side are you guys really on? Are you guys kind of just like, more, are you guys just disagreeing with everything that he does, or do you guys have your own genuine views? But when it comes to food, it's something, unanimous with everybody, no matter what side of, the river that you stand on, whether it's the blue or the red. We all need food. We all need to consume healthy food, and we're all going to have kids that grow up in an environment, and we don't want them to be eating healthy. Like, we want them to be eating healthy food too, not processed garbage, right?
100%.
Do you think we need our own movement? We need our own Maha?
I don't think so. I think it's like Australia, lifestyle wise, especially where we live, pretty healthy like lifestyles.
Yes.
And I think it just needs to be spread from that sense. Stick to the fundamentals, exercise, eat like simple foods, like the stay away from like the packaging and all the plastic wraps and things like this. Like simple foods are most likely to be healthy. So that's my kind of belief. I'm not exactly sure on what Australia's approval for chemicals and stuff in our food is. I'm not entirely sure. I know the FDA has been kind of the flag bearer for most of the Western world. Is like they were seen as the kind of the committee, like the reviewer, and a lot of countries just kind of like piggybacked off that, like, oh, they've approved it, we'll approve it. Exactly. COVID happens, they've approved it, we'll approve it. So yeah, maybe a bit of critical thinking would be beneficial, but there's also like a lot of kind of synergies that we benefit from not having to invest into all that ourselves, from a taxpayer standpoint. But then who knows, maybe it could create a new industry here as well, which would be very beneficial.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I think what you touched on is education, right? Because people sort of know exactly what you're saying, principles of movement, principles of a clean diet, things like that. But I think what's so difficult now is it's so hidden. Things that people perceive as healthy are filled with chemicals that they can't pronounce on the back of the packet, right? And even if you look at things like vegetarian meat or vegan meats and things like that, you go, oh, vegan, that's like a healthier lifestyle, more regenerative. And then you read on the back of the packets and you can't pronounce and don't know what half these things are. And it's crazy heavily processed, right? And, I think an education, educating the population on a healthy way of life is not just beneficial for the metabolic health of the population, but for the financial health of the country. If we've got less people in hospitals, less people suffering from autoimmune disease, less people being admitted to hospital for cancer and heart disease and diabetes and things that are environmentally induced, more or less, right? Then we're going to have a healthier, more financially stable, better Australia for all Australians, right? If your parents are healthy, you're going to be healthier. If you go to school in the canteen serving lunches that are healthy.
Yeah, like a cultural decision.
Exactly. And as to your point, I don't know if we necessarily need a RFK flag bearer waving around, like make Australia healthy again sort of movement. But I think education needs to be at the forefront of these sort of things. And you've got, you even at the supermarket, you go and you look at like some processed protein bars or whatever, and they've got a 5-star rating. And then you look at eggs and they've got a 3-star rating, and you're like, what system are we living in here? They've got like, it's crazy. If you look up like some of the crazy inconsistencies when it comes to those star ratings and the nutritional ratings and then the guidelines that Australia puts out, it's like, hold on, this isn't necessarily a whole foods, organic, animal-based diet, something that, humans have been living with for, hundreds, thousands of years, right? This is kind of like pushing in the direction of, hey, it's okay to consume these processed foods. And it feels like they kind of do that because that's where the money is,
Yeah.
Like these industries rely on that. If there are educational programs that go out to say, stick to the outside of the supermarket, stick to the fruit, stick to the refrigerated dairy, stick to the meat, and maybe some frozen berries at the end, and get yourself out of there and miss all the aisles and all that packaged garbage in the middle, right? Then hundreds of companies lose out on Australian revenue, right? And they can't let that happen. In their heads, they're like, and in their heads, they probably don't even think they're doing the wrong thing. They're just making money, just like all of us need to make money, right? So that's the problem. It's this, food pyramid, I guess you will, of, this hierarchy and this infrastructure that's just built to sustain the amazing but also vast population that we have here. And we've done so through, mass agriculture, mass farming, monocrop agriculture with, broad use of pesticides like glyphosate and things like that, which have terrible health ramifications long term. And I think that's what's so concerning about the health issues that we face today. It's very easy to say, eat a balanced diet, do a lot of exercise, get sun, get good sleep, and live a life that you're happy with and you enjoy. And those 5 things are probably the fulfillment to a healthy body and a healthy mind, right? But now we're sort of getting poisoned by things that it's like, why can't I drink the tap water? You're telling me that fluoride lowers IQ and I can't drink the tap water, and this is something that people don't necessarily know, right? And when it comes to the pesticides, glyphosate being in most of the things that we consume that are potentially which are labeled as healthy, like apples, berries, pears, mangoes, everything mass sprayed with these terrible chemicals on a monocrop agricultural basis, where the soil doesn't get enough time to regenerate, so the food doesn't have the same nutrient density that it should, and it's just farming the same land over and over again. We could talk about microplastics and how prevalent they are. I catch wild fish, and if they test wild fish off the East Coast, there's more microplastics in there than like almost all other forms of meat. You know what I mean? So yeah, exactly. Because the ocean's so full of microplastics, and these fish take them in, and they're in their brains, they're in their gills, they're in their blood and in their bones. It's crazy. Like even you and I right now, even you and I right now, we have microplastics in our body. We are some percentage of microplastics. And 60 years ago, that didn't exist. Right? 100 years ago, plastic wasn't even invented. So, and that's the thing. Like education needs to go beyond eat eggs, eat broccoli, go for a run, get 8 hours of sleep. It needs to go beyond that. We need to start thinking about these issues like, okay, why do we fluorinate the water? How is that initiated? Like, who controls that? Who owns the water? Why did we come up with like fluoride in the first place? And this is even crazier, and this is some proper conspiracy shit that we're talking about right now, but we'll
hit me with it.
We'll rip into it. The only reason they started putting fluoride in the water was because it was a byproduct of manufacturing aluminium. So to manufacture aluminium, fluoride is this byproduct, and these people in these aluminium farms, they were like, hey, we need to figure out a way to market this because we've got all of it sitting here. And then they were able to, liaison with the dental association, tell everybody that it makes your teeth healthier, cleaner, more stable, right? And then push it through. And now every single state in Australia drinks fluorinated water. And in the US, through Robert F. Kennedy's work, we're starting to get more studies on the issue, figure out if this is a real thing, if fluoride it actually is bad for your brain. And because this is the thing, they talk about fluoride crossing the blood-brain barrier, which is quite a scary concept because not many chemicals can cross that barrier.
How's it work?
I don't exactly know the science behind it, but a certain amount of fluoride, if you have enough of it, it can cross the barrier. And it actually, there's been tests done that it actually lowers IQ, especially in children.
Yeah.
So here we go. Common tap water conspiracy theories. That's what Carl's got up for us right here. Fluoride is mind control. Well, that's not true. Tap water. See, this is the problem that when we talk about conspiracy theories on the show, it's like, what are you taking seriously these days? Tap water contains dangerous chemicals, chlorine, heavy metals, and pharmaceuticals. Heavy metals is an issue, less so when it comes to water, more so when it comes to fish. Sorry.
Big bottled water is behind the fear of tap water. Now that's the conspiracy
That's
theory.
some serious double
Mount Franklin up there.
Nah, you're right. And this is the thing. What do we... And then like microchips and nanotechnology. Take this away, Carl. Take this away. We could get sidetracked all day on this type of stuff.
Yeah.
But things like this is the thing. When you talk about these type of things, people just dismiss you as like conspiracy theorists or, you're completely wacky. Of course, the tap water's safe. The dental association say so. But we have the right to know. And I think we have the right to seek verification from our leaders in power to know that we're being led down the right path. Right. And the thing is, they don't even want you to ask these questions. They don't even want you to explore these issues because you should just stay in the status quo. But for the health of ourselves, for the health of our own children, for the health of Australia, we have to ask these questions. We have to get out there and be advocates, not just for a healthy, clean diet, but for a healthy Australia. All of us in it together. Like that's kind of like the vision I see. And I think having a flag bearer like RFK makes something like that easier. But the Make Australia Healthy Again movement exists within ourselves. We have the power to drive this, and if more people can become educated themselves, drive it through their own life, and inspire others, I think that's the best way forward.
No, that's a good point. There's also the like relationship of how much money is involved in this, and like the political sphere and how that's influenced. Did you see? I think it came out like a couple days ago, or maybe today. I'm not sure. Anyway, I saw that the South Australian Premier is trying to launch this bill. Maybe it's been approved. Maybe it's still under route. You can pull this up if you want. It's about like taking money out of politics. They essentially want to publicly fund each party's campaign. And this guy, he's gotten the idea. He's currently the premier, but he used to be over in the States. And it was during Obama's midterm election. And he was involved in it all. And he said that he was just like completely taken aback by how money is influencing like the congressman, and how the congressmen are spending like 60, 70, 80% of their time doing fundraisers and just trying to secure the funds to then go and like, I don't know, campaign. So it's like they're stuck in, if you're spending like 60, 70% of your job trying to source funds for the next kind of campaign, like not only is that not good for the country at all and your constituents, but it's like you're losing total, like you're losing reality, because you're now stuck in this new loop, and you're like, oh, my job is like, I need to win next time, and you're stuck in that loop. And kudos to this guy who's thinking about like overturning that in South Australia. But then you also like need to look at that. Okay, so if each campaign is publicly funded,
Yes.
like we're also looking at independents running. That has to be publicly funded. So where's the line drawn from I can run for like government, you know?
Yes.
Because that's an interesting conversation. That I assume there has to be some kind of threshold to, you have to reach this, and now you're an official candidate.
Of course.
And then like that's a barrier of entry. That's a significant barrier of entry.
And that process could become corrupt. Could become corrupt.
That could be a lot worse.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it becomes, like there's so many boundaries and limitations when it comes to becoming one of these figures that you never even get to see any of that government money, because you never even get to become a candidate in the first place. And there's a tight ring of people that, are always running, and then their sons are running and their friends are running. And it's all just this like tight knit political community, which is essentially what we already have now. But the thing is, instead of the barrier to entry being like becoming a politician and getting your name on the ballot, right now it's money, right?
Yeah.
And Bernie Sanders has been talking about this for years, and I love Bernie.
Taking the money out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, he's got a lot of good things to say, and he's been very consistent in his messaging. Other things I'm not such a big fan of, but I think this has genuine merit. And when you say the government funding political campaigns, immediately you hear that and you're like, whoa, no way. Surely we're not going to use taxpayer money to fund the campaigns of people who want to run for office, right? They should generate the money themselves, right? But if you actually look into it, that is indeed the best way forward, because you have giant political parties which have huge donors, right? And these donations aren't coming from just like one-off, two-off billionaires or whatever it is. They're coming from large corporations that push their agenda on these political parties, that allow them to get away with putting poison in our food, pushing pharmaceuticals that people don't necessarily need, privatizing roads and being able to charge $15 for tolls when, this is Australia.
Yeah, we're going to look at whose government did that. Like when did tolls start coming in?
Pull that up, Carl. Pull that up, how tolls in Australia became prevalent and how they've expanded into our society today. But I think that's the essence of kind of what we're talking about here a little bit. Do you think health is a personal responsibility, or do you think we need systemic change across the board?
I think it has to be like a government kind of major concern at all time. But I think it's more coming down to, it's not like they're acting, I don't know, in an evil kind of way. It's just like they're not specialists in this either. They've been told by a specialist, or maybe it's a company, that look, we've already done all our health checks, it's fine, and this is what we're recommending you do, and we'll give you this for the reason, and they don't think it's harmful at all. And it's just happening over and over again, slowly getting worse and worse. And that's where I think we're at. So yeah, it definitely has to be like a government kind of led thing. Like they have to be
Mm.
conscious in all this,
Yes.
but it's the individual and the people that will raise that concern to the government. Like it would be hard for a collective government. Sure, you'll have some independents if we're talking about Australia,
Mm.
who will act and raise and make a big fuss about it. But I don't think any change would really come from that unless it was, a big movement. Which maybe, you're convincing me on this, Maha. I'm being convinced as we go.
Well, it's kind of, the way that even coming back to the conversation before, we've kind of lost touch with democracy a little bit. Because if we're talking about true democracy, we're talking about a society where anyone can become the leader, where this is a theater where we get to exchange ideas, exchange beliefs, share them in a way where we're able to have a cordial debate. But instead, we've got two powerhouse parties which need immense amounts of funding, billions of dollars. And this isn't in the US, this is in Australia, where we need billions of dollars worth of funding to promote these campaigns, to get people out on the side of the street waving flags and signs and everything like that.
Yeah.
And money corrupts. It's inevitable that process is going to become corrupted, and that's exactly what we're dealing with right now, right? A result of that is exactly what we're about to talk about now. Carl's just pulled this up, how tolls took over Australian roads, sorry. So this is the rise of public-private partnerships, PPPs, from the 1990s onwards. So that state governments facing budget constraints began turning to private companies to fund and operate major infrastructure, right? So that shifts the model from public ownership to corporatized access, which, from a state government perspective, they're facing budget constraints, exactly the competitive capitalist environment that we're talking about, right? And this is, when you look at society today, you look at communist countries and, according to the West, that's the absolute worst way to live. They're very totalitarian. There's not a lot of say. They're led by dictator type leaders, right? But to sell essentially our freedom to these companies, right? And then pay the price in it, not just with our own financials and our own livelihoods, but for generations to come. It's kind of like we're shooting ourselves in the foot here a little bit. The transurban rise from operator to monopoly. So Transurban, an infrastructure giant, gradually acquired most toll roads in major cities. In Sydney, they operate 15 of 19 toll routes. Wow. In Melbourne, operates the CityLink and Westgate Tunnel, which is under construction. And in Brisbane, they control all the toll roads. So one company essentially has a monopoly over all these toll operations in Australia. And then how about this is the real kicker right here. Long-term contracts and limited government oversight. Many toll roads have contracts lasting up to 40 years or more. So we're not just shooting ourselves in the foot.
Some contracts prevent governments from building competing fee roads or free roads. Wow. So it's like actually harming the transport and limiting the traction.
Because instead of it just being a free market where we're just going to build the most efficient and productive road system we can, it's now becoming, hey, don't build a road there because we've got this toll and we can direct a lot of traffic here. That's going to create more revenue for Transurban.
And it's 40-year contract, so it's like, hey, you signed this 30 years ago.
This is actually the craziest thing. Carl, can you look up if Transurban is even an Australian company? Because this is what I reckon is real crazy. I reckon not only are we paying all this money in tolls, it's not even going to hardworking Australians like you and I. It's going overseas, right? Which is really, really terrible. When you talk about, and we already talked about offshoring before, but this is to a mass scale. We're offshoring essentially our own land, our own right to transportation around our cities, our roads, right? To a foreign company. I don't know if that's right. Carl's typing it in right now to make sure this is true.
But it happens in plenty other industries as well.
For sure. So let's see. Is Transurban an Australian company? It is an Australian company. Okay, so I was wrong. Disregard everything I said.
It's actually check the tax payable though.
True. Yeah. And then they also do work in the US and Canada as well, and are listed on the ASX. Wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting. That's the thing. There's so many different issues that we could talk about here, and so many of them have been corrupted by money and tolls. It's one of those ones where it really feels like a rort in the moment. You know what I mean? Especially when you're talking about $15, like,
and they're only in like Sydney and major cities. You go out rural, regional, there's no tolls. You know, it's just the people around here that are getting stuffed by them.
What do you think about RFK's work with vaccines?
What do I think about it?
Mm.
I think it was good to raise awareness. I know that there's definitely people who've taken extreme lengths on it and viewed, just taking extreme lengths on it. I don't know. COVID was an interesting one. Like my family actually ran a COVID clinic in my dad's a GP, and we ran a COVID clinic, and I was a part of it as well. So I mean, I was completely involved in it all, and I've been vaccinated and everything. I was like afterwards and going out of it, I was definitely a little bit skeptical. But it's more just around the whole kind of COVID lockdown that I don't know, threw me off the wrong way, I guess. Just like the government actually flexing their power, like, oh, forgot governments can do this, you know. Forgot you can just start closing borders and stay inside,
and taking our freedoms away.
Yeah, and they can do that really easily. And I guess that comes back to, I remember reading a really interesting thing, and I was actually talking about the Muslim world, and it was talking about the idea of a family and how the family takes care of themselves, and you have a sick grandparent, you look after the sick grandparent, and then like a Western society has shifted away from this a lot more to then say, instead of placing your trust in your family and your family members, you now have to place it in like, or we're going to convince you to place it into this higher authority, being a state or being a government. And that's a pretty interesting thought, because there's still a lot of cultures around the world that are more family focused, and that's reflected in their government policy because they won't have as strong healthcare and things like that. But yeah, in Australia, we have that really strong healthcare, and there is a shift between the family and the state, and yeah, like we're completely sold on it. You know?
Yes,
like I think this is also partly because Australia's a very new country. Immigrants, colonialism, we're all here, we're new, and it's just like this has kind of always been there. The state's always been there, so we always believe in it.
Do you think Australia and maybe the Western world on a broader scale has a problem with fertility rates? We're seeing some of the lowest fertility rates in Australia that we've seen ever, right? Where now we're past we're below the replacement rate, where women are not having 2+ kids. They're having something like 1.4, right? Which means that we're going to have a dwindling population, at least from Australians that already live here. Yes, we'll have an inflow of immigration, right? And we should. But, you know, I think there needs to be some conversation about this. Are we not replacing ourselves at a fast enough level? Are we not going to have people to step up into the jobs that we've created for Australia? And are we not going to be able to support our own economy if, you know, shit hits the fan?
Yeah, I mean, like Australia's an interesting one, because we've had this for quite a while. A lot of Western countries have it, but Australia has as well. And Australia, as like a nation, we've had a population crisis. In terms of crisis, it's a different type of crisis. But yeah, since like World War One, World War Two, when the rest of the world started seeing like actual, oh, countries are still being invaded, territories are still expanding. Like, oh, we kind of forgot that happened. And I think, I don't know exactly, but I think it might have been the Whitlam government. They were looking at it and they're saying, wow, Australia really needs to kind of, like we need more immigration, because how else are we going to kind of protect ourselves? Like if we don't really have the military to protect our beautiful large continent, but if we have the economic sustainability and we can actually populate around Australia, then that's a deterrent in itself. So we've always kind of had this immigration kind of momentum. Like that's been us for ages, you know, probably since the very start. You know, we were like, oh, we need more people, to gold rush happening, everyone come over.
We're a multicultural country. Like without, you know, my Serbian, I'm half Serbian, half Australian. So without my Serbian grandma and grandpa migrating here back in the 80s, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. And, you know, so many people are a product of immigration. And I think this is one of the big problems when we talk about this, right? When we talk about being pro-Australia, being pro-family, being pro-women having a lot of kids and building our population, not with outsiders, but with insiders, people that really care about Australia, that are assimilated with the culture. Whenever you talk about that, it's always kind of seen as anti-immigration. And if you're anti-immigration, that's kind of seen as being a bit racist. You know what I mean? But that's not what we're talking about here at all. That's kind of like, a caveat to the issue that you're trying to force me into. But that's not what I'm talking about here at all. I'm talking about building our own working class from the ground up and building Australia from the people that we already have, not importing more. Right.
Yeah.
And I think the multicultural society that we have in Australia is an absolute gem. The fact that I'm able to go to work and talk to people from all over the world and kind of gain perspective on their experiences and their lives without having to leave my suburb even. Like Carl and I go to the gym locally and we'll be in a sauna with two people speaking Spanish, like a lady who's Russian, someone who's from Hawaii, and then like 3 or 4 Australian guys. And this is the coolest experience ever. It's like you're kind of in a youth hostel, but you're right here in Freshwater, right? But it really is a pleasure, right? Because in other parts of the country, it's not like that. It's, very, very like, singular race, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Like in Japan, that's what it definitely feels like. It's like, there's no multiculturalism here. Everyone's just Japanese, right? And, credit to them. But I think what we've built and what we've been able to achieve with this multicultural society is absolutely amazing. And I'm not saying that we should stop immigration or shift the focus away from it. But I think policies need to be put in place to fight this fertility rate, because you think about how difficult it is to have children now, not just because of constraints that we have economically, but it's so expensive just being able to fund yourself, right? We have a cost of living crisis, right? It's hard to be able to fill up your tank with petrol, hard to be able to get groceries, hard to be able to afford a home. And now you're talking about having multiple kids. It's becoming harder and harder for average Australians to get by rather than build a family. And I think that has to do with why we've seen such a decline, right?
Yeah.
Do you think the Australian government needs to get involved? Do you think we need to have incentives in place that, there's potential rebates for having more kids, there's potential, waivering stamp duty if you've got a family bigger than 4? I'm not saying that these policies would work or that we should implement them. I'm just throwing up theoretical ones to kind of lend a hand to you to answer the question of, should the government play a role?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really think so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, like, yeah, we're multicultural society. That's where we've been. I think that's where we're going. And yeah, boosting Australia nationalism and manufacturing and industry, Australian industry, that would be the end goal. Kind of, if you're saying what could we do, what would be great, Australian industry, build new sectors, new industries in Australia. That would be the best thing, because that's what will bring up the the middle class,
Of course,
which it did in like the 50s and 60s and things like this, before the globalization sent it out. So that would be the main thing. But I don't think it doesn't really matter to me where those people come from. Like, if you're an immigrant, I don't know, in 10 years time, coming in and you're helping that sector, like, you're an Australian now, kind of thing. I do understand the constraints of immigration placing stress on our existing infrastructure, social networks, and things like this, and that's a valid concern. But I also think, like, we have so much land in Australia, and like, what was the last kind of city built in Australia? Was it Gold Coast? That kind of just extension of Brisbane?
Yeah.
Like,
that
we have
makes
so
a lot of
much.
sense.
We have so much area. Yeah, all our major cities. Correct me if I'm wrong, fact check, but I think all our major cities are coastal.
That's true.
So, like, I just think we have so much space, and technology is now here that I don't see why we couldn't expand a bit more. Yeah, I don't see it as a major concern, really. I think, yeah, it does place stress on our infrastructure, but I think if there's safeguards, if we did it properly, it could be better, not just for Australia but for the world. Like, if the industries we're talking about, if we're building new renewable industries and things like this, that can then launch us and build those manufacturing jobs and things like that, I think that's such a great kind of step in the right direction to kind of leveling that out.
I think there is a utopian Australia where we're all not, just not hustled in cities, but spread out. And I think when people talk about, because this is another thing that gets tied to the racism issue so heavily, that when people talk about, is Australia full, right? Is Australia full? Should we take a break from like mass immigration essentially? And mass immigration is essentially what keeps this country afloat from recession. If we didn't have immigration, we would already be in a recession. We're more or less in a per capita GDP recession, right? And without an influx of new people, we're already living in it. And when it comes to crises like the housing crisis, right, where you've got such high demand that's outstripped supply, because it's all well and good to say like, oh, like we've got so much land, we can build new cities, but we can't. Obviously, we can't build them fast enough because property prices continue to go up, and these cities and these places in these rural areas and less populated towns and regions aren't attracting the same demand. People are still flocking to cities, right?
Yeah.
So, but as soon as you bring that up, people go, "Oh, you're anti-immigration, you're racist." You shut it down. But I think it's a conversation we need to have.
I think so as well, but I think there's a balance. I think that it's the same way, like the housing and the issue and these kind of structural things that have withholding us back and placing the pressure when the immigration comes on it and it kind of like dismantles. I think that there's policy changes that can kind of set it up in the right way to grow sustainably. So when we think about those kind of things, I think like, okay, well, if we had more tax money, we could go and implement these things with taxable money. And it's like, okay, well, where are we going to get that? And then I guess the natural answer is like, okay, well, can we figure out a way to tax these massive corporates? Like they've been going for quite a while. Like, can we do it yet? And it's just so complicated that my understanding is that it's just too complicated in a globalized world that we haven't been able to track them down and get it done. What do you think about that?
It's an absolute shame and treason against the Australian people. The fact that like all these giant multinational corporations that are based in tax havens overseas get to, operate freely here in Australia and pay 0% tax, while, our highest tax bracket is, 48%, 50%, whatever it is. It's ridiculous, right? You have these giant multinationals who sell, thousands of products here, or, provide a social media service or something like that, and generate so much revenue from our economy and our population, and they pay absolutely nothing in tax because they're based in Iceland.
Yeah.
Get out of here, right? That shouldn't exist, but it does, and it probably will for a long time. And not many people are willing to put their hand up in politics and say, hey, we need to really get these guys paying their fair share, because these guys control the money. They control whether you're going to be the political candidate in 4 years, because they've got the money to fund your campaign, right? And I think that's why Bernie is so right when he talks about bringing the money out of the campaign, having it state funded, federally funded, and there being a cap on there, and then there being an egalitarian selective process to put a appropriate candidate up to receive that funding, and then for him or her to go out there and campaign in the right way. I think that is the truest form and sense of democracy. Not necessarily like, okay, to become prime minister, I have to be in one of these parties. And to be
I actually think Australia did launch one of these. I think it passed maybe just before the election or just after it. But there was a cap. I definitely know it made it to the Senate, I believe. But yeah, there was a cap on each kind of party. So if you had 30 seats last election, or if you're competing, I think it's if you're competing for 30 seats, you get like 30 times the amount of money that an independent competing for one. But it's still it's still privately funded, but that's the amount of money you can spend on the election. So that makes sense, right?
For sure.
Because then that evens it out a bit. Except when you look at the independents in this scenario, because independents, like a lot of the successful ones, have quite a bit of money. It's like, okay, well, where they're getting their money from? It's just because they have, I don't know, instead of it coming from a massive gas corporate going to Liberal or Labor, it's now just like a local multi-millionaire, maybe a billionaire, maybe like a Justin Hems or whatever empire you have, they can now fund this kind of person's campaign. And like a lot, the independents were outraged by this bill. I guess the major reason is that they kind of lose that advantage. But also like a Liberal and Labor, like the big parties, if they know that they always win whatever electoral seat, they can then shift money to another seat. So I guess an independent might be disadvantaged from that standpoint, but as it stands, like a lot of the successful independents have like a lot more money going around than your standard Liberal Labor candidate or Greens candidate in that area.
No,
So that's like that's kind of like what we're talking about here. There's like a bit of a cap there, but I think that's interesting as well.
For sure, for sure. It's just, it's so interesting when you look into it and like the strings that get pulled to put these people in place,
Yeah.
right? And it's crazy to think that, you know, the average Australian can't do it. You either need backing from from a giant corporation or one of the parties, or someone to privately support you, right? And that isn't necessarily democracy. That's a system built off materialism and finance, right? That just can push agendas through, you know, economics, which is pretty scary.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. Like we talk about democracy and stuff, but we don't live in a democracy. Like the ultimate democracy would be every decision that's made in Australia, every Australian gets a vote on it. There is no leaders. It's like whatever you want to say, let's all vote on it. And I've read I think I'm like 3/4 of the way through like Plato's Republic.
Yeah,
and this is
great read.
Yeah, this is like talking about ancient days and talking about like, okay, well, how can we structure our perfect government? And they're talking about things like, okay, we used to have this Senate, and there'd be like I think it was just like all the blokes of noble birth. They're all there, and they're leading it. And they would come in and they'd say, okay, goddamn, the Constantinople's freaking stole our horses. What should we do? And like, yeah, invade them, take them down. We're going to take them all. And then the next day they'd come back, and then another guy would speak and goes, God, I think we might have overreacted. So they'd declare war like the day before, and then the next day they're like, oh, I think we're okay. And that's kind of like the whole idea of like, that's why a true democracy doesn't work, because there's too many heads, too many hands in the kitchen. And yeah, it doesn't work like that. So then you kind of like streamline things, and where we're at now is this kind of like it's just been nudged this way, nudged that way, nudged this way, nudged this way. Like we were talking about earlier about firefighters, police. That's very socialistic.
Of course.
And then you have your capitalistic companies and stuff. So we have that, and then we have elected leaders, democratic. But then once they're in there, they can make their own decisions. So it's kind of like oligarchical. And then you still have like a head of state, being your prime minister, as like the voice of reason, who kind of is perceived as, I don't know, if you just turn on the TV and you saw the guy speaking, you'd be like, oh, that's like, we're in like a monarchy, we're in like a dictatorship or something. But it's not like that, you know? So it's interesting, like everything kind of ebbs and flows. And when I was reading this book, Plato's idea of this perfect, have we spoken about this, by the way?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Might have.
So his perfect whatever government rule, in like 400 BC or whatever it was that they're gonna grab a bunch of children and they're gonna teach the kids philosophy, but they're gonna be completely secluded from the rest of society. And they're gonna have these guardians, and the guardian's gonna like look after the kids, protect them. The kids are no longer allowed to speak to their parents, anything like this. They're completely excluded from society, so they become detached. And that's to take away their bias, essentially. That's the theory behind it.
Of course.
So they detach the kids, and the kids grow. The kids can leave this whenever they want to, and then they return to a normal life. They forgo all their benefits of being the ruling class. But when they reach of age, whenever that is, they're now the ruling class, and whatever they say goes. And they're supposed to be like completely dedicated to whatever the people want, although they've never lived with them. And if you're in the ruling class, you essentially cannot have kids. You cannot like have possessions, no relationships with anyone outside. And it's just like, you're meant to be this, I don't know, this person outside of everyone else's reality. And then, so that's the ruling class. But there's just so many issues with that as well.
100%.
But when you look at like the structure, it's like, okay, so the ruling class, they're all equal. There's no one vote. It's kind of like a communist class. Like they don't own anything. They're just doing whatever they can for the state. But then the general public still live in this kind of, I don't know, capitalistic society. Like they're still trading goods. Tax comes from companies whenever they offer it to like build public buildings, whatever they do. So that's like a really interesting kind of setup of how he thought the perfect government would be.
I think in theory, like, because Plato's idea always talks about like philosopher kings ruling over the land and being completely egalitarian and devoid from bias, which is what you're explaining. But I think what that fails to take into account is human emotion and human greed,
Those kids are
jealousy.
so fucked up.
Exactly. Like, especially if they're, you know, removed from their parents, removed from the outside world, these aren't necessarily going to be people that are pure of heart like Plato imagines them to be. Because in theory, his idea makes sense to create people that do not have a bias, that are completely for the people, that do not desire material possessions.
He probably
or
thinks
power.
he can like bring pure of heart out of them, like raise it. That's an
which
interesting conversation.
might be possible, but also all you have to do is get a couple bad apples in, you know, that group of kids, and you're in big trouble. Because once they're in power, then it's like, okay, they're going to refuse to give up their power. They're going to use their power to maybe not even nefariously, but they're going to use their power to enhance their own lives, the lives of their family, the lives of people they know, right? Because now they're the king. They can do certain things that other people can't. And they're going to, even if it's just in little ways, start abusing that power. And then over generation, maybe you started with a group that was really good, but now it's just evolved into something that is not what Plato imagined at all. So I think when you're taking into account humans trying to run humans, you have to take into account emotion, because we all deal with it and we're all going to be corrupted by it, right?
Yeah.
And I think like this is a really crazy idea. The fact that AI could potentially run our political system. I know that sounds absolutely like worst
putting
case
them on
scenario.
top.
Yeah, it's like sounds like worst case scenario.
I was talking about
doomsday.
putting them as slaves.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know what you mean, because like it's absolute doomsday scenario, like Matrix type stuff, where you've got the AI robots necessarily like sort of governing humans, right? But then you think about it and you're like, okay, if we could potentially create an AI sentient robot that was devoid of human emotion, completely devoid of bias, had only our best interests at heart, right? Thought purely logistically and efficiently like machines do, right? If we were able to create that pure being, then that would be the best person to govern us, because they don't have anything to gain from, you know, the gas
And they're never
industry.
going to die.
Right? Yeah, exactly. They're never going to die. They're always going to be perpetually in power, I guess, if they were to get there, right? And you'd have an egalitarian leader at least, and that person that AI model would generate the outcomes for society, which would be, you know, algorithmic rather than emotional and personal, right? We wouldn't be playing a, you know, political game where the whole point is to tell everybody how evil the other side is and tell everyone how good your policies are going to be. It would be, okay, this is completely based on logic, reasoning, efficiency, and the best for all Australians. This is how we're going to solve the housing crisis. XYZ, we're going to do this, and that, and this is the best way forward. And if we were able to create a robot like that, an AI like that, that was sentient and able to, you know, bring us out of this trap of the human condition, right? Because that's what it is. Whenever you talk about democracy or communism or whatever ruling structure you want to talk about, you're fighting the law of us. You're fighting the human condition, the human experience, what it means to be us and to have emotion and to have bias within ourselves and to have both fear, love, and pain radiating out of you. Because you don't necessarily need to be corrupted by evil to be corrupted by power. You can be corrupted by love, right?
Wow.
Like you can be in a position of power, and because I'm now the Prime Minister of Australia, right? I get to make Joey, you know, put him up in some nice place, right? I get to, you know, take all my mates and give them great lives and give my children better lives. And that's not necessarily me being an evil person. It's just me trying to provide for my family, right?
Yeah.
And that's an emotional part of me. I'll always want to do that as a human being, right? But it's not necessarily the best outcome for the country, right? And so who better than to govern us than an AI who has no stakeholders, who has no emotions, nothing to lose or gain, right? But then you get into some pretty crazy territory where it's like, what if this thing turns on
you're just
us?
handing him the keys. It's kind of like when you're talking about communism and you're talking about like, we could live a life where we don't have to worry. We're not really competing anymore. But then there is someone with the power, and if they're benevolent and all loving, I don't know, maybe society would be better off. But the chances, like you've already handed over the power, like there's no going back now, and you got generations to come. So like that consolidated power is always risky. But yeah, if it's an emotionless thing, that cannot be hacked, untouchable, galactic empire. Who knows? Maybe it would be good.
You talked about Plato a little bit, and I know you're a big fan of philosophy as well. Talk about your journey with philosophy, certain philosophers you really connect with, and
Yeah.
lessons that you've learned from those experiences.
Yeah, I'm on a bit of like a philosophy journey, I'd say. Um, I've definitely, I've how I'm doing it. I've spoken to a couple of people, but yeah, how I'm doing it is that I'm starting kind of chronologically. So I'm going as far back as I could find, which is like Socrates and Plato and um, yeah, these guys.
Mm.
And I'm working my way forward. So I've read a bit of Epicurean, but like mainly Stoics, Greek and Roman, like Epictetus, Cicero, Socrates, Plato. Uh,
We've talked about meditations before too.
yeah, Marcus Aurelius is a big
course.
man.
Mm-hmm.
He's a G.
He is a G. When you read it for the first time, you're like, what is this guy talking about? And then you read
Yeah.
it for the sixth time and you're like, damn, he's breaking it
Yeah.
down right
Have you read it
here.
6 times?
No, but I've read certain passages over and over and over again
Yeah.
to try and understand them, right? Because
Yeah.
he morphs everything into such a crazy metaphor that you read it the first time, you're like, what are you talking about horses and a stable and a barn for, Like, this is wigging me out. And then you read it and you're like, okay, that represents this, and this represents that, and because by virtue, and then you learn the lesson for yourself. It's kind of like, it's exactly what Bruce Lee said, whereas like a teacher can't be the truth. Like Marcus Aurelius can't offer you the truth, like read this book, you will find the truth. A teacher is only a guide to discover the truth within yourself, and that's what the book does so well. It's not that he just tells you like, oh, you must be good to all others and treat others exactly how you'd be treated. Everyone can hear that from me spitting in this mic every single time we do a show, right? But it's discovering that journey for yourself through the metaphor, through the story, through the experience, right? That's what really sticks with people and changes their character and enhances their quality of life and their human potential.
Yeah, how I'm doing meditations is like, I read it once, I got pen just like underlined all my passages that I really connected with and that I liked the most, and then like I went through the book doing that, and I did it all in black pen, and then I'm thinking like, oh, 3 years down the track, I'm probably going to do it again with like a new perspective. I'm going to go through the same thing. Oh, what connected when I was 20? What connects now when I'm 25, kind of thing. And I think I'm just going to do that maybe for the next like 20 years at least, and just keep revisiting it. But yeah, chronologically, like I think I want to go into like a couple medieval, maybe even Arabic. I think that would be really interesting. Get some translations of that during like, when Europe was all in disasters, check out what was happening in the Arabic world.
Yes.
And then work your way through modern Nietzsche and those kind of guys. I think would be really interesting as well. But it's like, it's a whole journey. Like there's no stopping. I'm just going to, like, whenever I have a bit of free time, there's always a book around that I'm ongoing through and just pick it up in a couple passages. I have a journal that I've kind of record favorite passages, quotes, from different people. And I've also included like part of the, how I've started reading the Bible.
Yes.
And it's a bit of a spiritual journey, but also a philosophical journey. I've heard that a lot of the Bible was also, and the teachings behind it, less so than the story, but the teachings, the underlying principles, especially of the New Testament, is kind of inspired by a lot of earlier philosophy, because this is teaching you before a lot of these major religions what is the best way to live life, what is a good life. And then Christianity takes this principle as well. I guess other people have the principle as well, Quran and whatnot, but it's what is a good life. And I want to see what Christianity has to say on that philosophy kind of side of things as well. So I do have a couple quotes in there. Can't remember them off my top of my head, but they're in there.
No, that's good. And to have something that you journal, something that you're able to express yourself through is super important. And I think it's a really good testament to your character to be open-minded in that way, because so many people, if you're not raised in a Christian household, if you're not necessarily, like understanding of the Christian faith or anything like that, you got no interest in reading the Bible. Why do I waste my time with this 1,000,000-page book that's, a lot of it is filled with pretty dry content. Like I must say for myself, as an avid Christian, you try reading the Old Testament, you're going to be in deep waters of just going through, this crazy ancestral run of all these different names and all these different years that things happened. And, it can get dry. But I think challenging yourself, not just because of the journey of undertaking reading the Bible. It's such a big book, but challenging yourself mentally and emotionally and spiritually, and being able to put yourself out there and go, okay, let's unpack this for what it is. Let's give this a fair shot, and let me read this with a completely open mind and heart. And I think whatever you get out of it, Joey, will be positive.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Looking forward to continue on with it.
No, it is awesome.
But it's interesting also with early philosophy, how the early philosophers, they weren't just kind of like sitting thinking about what's the good life. They were the scientists, and they were the birth of all that as well.
Yes.
So they were like studying, like Pythagoras was a philosopher, later deemed the term mathematician.
Yes.
And things like that. So when I'm reading, like I read a short form of Aristotle when I was doing a cool hike, actually.
Okay.
The Tassie hike, the overland track.
Yes.
It was a really thin, like this big, and just had like all the keynotes essentially of Aristotle's beliefs and his life. And that was really interesting because I just pick it up each night and flick through a couple pages. But he was a biologist. Dude, Aristotle was cutting up animals for 3/4 of his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
He started in the academy in Athens. And then he went out. Again, he was like some Nepo baby, whatever. So he had mates with the king of probably somewhere in Yugoslavia or whatnot.
Yeah.
And then he was just hanging out, cutting open animals, writing these detailed diaries about anatomies of various animals, and trying to understand, like, wait a minute, how do the eyes work? How can they see? And things like that. And then he came back to Athens probably when he was like 50. And then that's when he just kind of like actually reconnected with other philosophical thought. And that was pretty interesting because he should be a biologist, you know?
Yeah.
That's how he should be remembered.
No, agreed. But like, you think Aristotle, and the first thing you think is philosophy, and then you don't really think of much else unless you know his works, right? You know, I think there's a duality between consumption and creation when we talk about philosophy. And you said, like back in the day, like these people weren't philosophers. They were just scientists, biologists, people of status, mathematicians like Pythagoras and things like that. But I think, just in the same way I described it with everyday people before, we're all philosophers in our own way. The way that every single person approaches life tells you everything you need to know. Like, I know who you are, Joey. I've been friends with you for 5 years now, and I understand your life's philosophy, right? Like you have a certain moral code and a certain ethical, boundaries that you stick to, and a certain way that you approach life. And everybody does. Whether that's for good, for evil, or for completely mundane, right? It's a huge spectrum. Have you ever thought about twisting it in your favor, and instead of just consuming, maybe creating something, like writing a book? I know journaling's kind of like the first step to get there, but I know we've had these philosophical conversations for years, and you're so well versed on the topic. Do you think you would ever, put the pen on the paper and be the creator in whatever form that may be?
Maybe when I'm older. I don't think I'd do it now. I think I'm like well behind, like I think there's so much to learn that I'm not in a place of expertise, and I don't think what I could add would be really that valuable.
Yes.
Like, sure, like philosophy in terms of like good life, a lot of it is just thoughts that pass through your head. They journal them, and then they might rewrite them a couple times till it sounds poetic, Sure, I probably could do that. Imagine it just be some stupid shit.
One time I was saving Donnies in a kayak.
But if like one of my parts of my life is that when I'm old, I want to be like wise. I want to have like that comes from experience, but it also comes from inner reflection and things like that. So I expect myself at that point in time as an older man to probably have the, I don't know, experience and repertoire to kind of to execute that.
I think nothing can replace experience, right? And it was actually one of the only things that isn't going in my favor when it comes to this podcast type stuff, because I'm good on the mic. I've got a great network of people that I can have on the show. I've got an amazing producer in Kyle. We've got an amazing environment here, right? The only problem is I'm 23. I don't know anything. And I haven't lived enough life. I haven't lived enough life to relate enough to people. I haven't lived enough life to gain perspective that I don't have. And I think I'm a well-read individual who has, pretty moderate views. And I say things that a lot of people can agree with and get behind, hopefully. But I'm only 23. This isn't lived experience. A lot of this has been taught to me. Some of it's lived, some of it's come from myself, some of it's come from, in my opinion, above. But, there's no substitute for it. Experience is wisdom, and experience is knowledge. And that's why your parents play such a pivotal role. Like when my parents used to tell me stuff, I'm like, what are these guys talking about? Like they know anything, right? Because you're 16 and you're like, these idiots, right? But then you get older and you're like, they've lived through it before. They were telling me the truth. They just want me to be the best version of myself. And they know what it's like to be 16, 18, 21, 45, all these ages, right? And they've got the lived experience. They have the lessons that they can give to us. And that's the problem with this show. I'm only young. I don't have that to give to people.
No,
and that's
you're doing an awesome job.
No, I appreciate that. But I think that's why it's so important not just to have, and I know we've just had a lot of my friends on who are, all my age, especially a lot of BACs. We're trying to get some more guests. I promise. We had some non-BAC guests planned for the weekend, unfortunately canceled on us.
Dude, yeah.
And then Joey stepped up, but, we're trying to move away from BACs, but that's why I want to have older people on the show to enhance my perspective, to give the audience a different perspective, and to, bring up our levels of wisdom and knowledge together, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And Carl's typed up, BACs represent. BACs do represent. And we're getting the director of the BAC program, Michelle Cook, on the show very soon, which will be the coolest interview. Like that episode, like the Bobby episode's pretty hyped. For those who don't know Bobby, you'll meet him pretty soon. But, Michelle Cook, that's going to be such a good conversation. I honestly can't wait.
That'd be awesome.
And she's exactly what I embodied, what I was talking about. She embodies that. She's not a teacher that tries to tell you this is the way, right? Or this is the solution for you. She tries to allow you to see that within yourself, because that's the only way you see it. You only stop driving the car fast after you have the accident. You know what I mean? You only take it easier on the surfboard after you dislocate your knee. Yeah. It's one of those things where you only learn lessons the hard way. And no matter how somebody breaks them down for you, somebody tries to communicate them to you, you have to discover it in yourself. Guys, that's it. That's all we got time for today. Joey,
awesome.
You've been the best. You always were going to be. It was written.
No, it was great fun, man. And kudos to setting this all up and doing it. Like, you're talking about experience. This is the best way to get the experience,
100%. Learn as I go. Every episode will get better. Carl will get better on the cameras, better on the mics, better on the YouTube videos. And hopefully I'll get better at interviewing people. And, we're just going to get cooler and cooler and cooler guests on the show and build it into something amazing. Like, we're committed to this. This is a long-term thing. This may be episode 8 and it'll go down in history for sure. But this is a long-term project, and it was a pleasure for you to be a part of it, Joey.
Awesome. Stoked to be here.
You're the man.
Cheers, gents.
I appreciate it. Catch everyone.